Final Major Project by Charlotte Brinkley. Ideas. Initial ideas. One of the initial ideas I've created for my final major project is a figure moving down a pathful corridor with different screens appearing that show symbols. Each screen could be created using a different animation technique. This idea could also contain some aspects from the story of Alice in Wonderland. The second idea that I have created for my final major project is an extension of the first short comic that was created as a group activity. A range of animation techniques that would be used to make each scene of the animation dynamic. The third idea that I've created for my final major project is a character that travels to different worlds in search of something. Each world viewed in the animation could be animated differently. The fourth idea that I have created for my final major project is a character advertising a fictional product which relates to one of the uses of semiotics. The fifth idea that I've created for my final major project is a character in a wasteland viewing a series of transmissions that could show pieces of the other ideas. Final idea. The idea that I have chosen to animate for my final major project is similar to the first of the initial ideas that I've created. The idea would be an alteration of the story of Alice in Wonderland, with elements changed to better fit the theme of the project and tell an interesting story. One of the ways I am thinking of achieving this is to add or alter elements to the story to make the theme of the story similar to the horror or mystery genres. My aim is to animate this idea in the form of a trailer for an animated show. This was decided because it would allow the animation to fit better into the time duration set by the project. This would also mean that the story of my animation would not be limited heavily by having to show scenes in direct chronological order and allow me to show a wider range of animation techniques. I could develop this idea further by creating a list of possible animation techniques that could be used in each part of the animation and experimenting with those techniques. Additionally, I could create a series of storyboards to better plan the events that occur in my animation. Character designs. Research. During this project, I have conducted research into relevant topics and subjects that I believe would assist in the production of my final animation. Some of these include information about semiotics, the adaptations of Alice in Wonderland, and different animation effects in After Effects. Pre-production. During the pre-production stage of developing my animation, I researched possible animation techniques that could be used in my animation, developed a storyboard to plan out what would happen throughout my final animation, and created possible designs for the characters that would appear in my final animation. Researched information about semiotics and other information that could be relevant. Production of final animation. The production of my final animation started once my storyboard was completed. I decided to divide the production process of my final animation so that the sections my storyboard had shown that were easier and quicker to complete would be animated first, such as scenes mainly involving text. By completing the scenes that would take less time first, I would have more time later to focus on creating and completing the sections of my animation that were more complex and would take longer to animate. The production process that was used to create many of the longest sections of my final animation was to create a Photoshop file containing any frames or illustrations required for the specific section of my final animation. This file would then be imported into After Effects, and the desired effect would be added or animated, such as altering the position or opacity of its specific layers and adding effects to the composition, an example being the shutter effect. Once this was completed, the composition settings were altered to adjust the time length and the composition was exported. My final animation was made up of 30 sections, ranging from lengths of 3 seconds to 30 seconds. These sections were put together in the right order and exported as MP4 files. Evaluation. A part of my final animation that I believe works well is that the range of animation techniques it uses are eye-catching. I believe this is because my final animation uses a mixture of dark and bright colors. Another factor of my final animation that I believe works well is that its duration is long enough that it is able to portray a comprehensive narrative. A part of my final animation that I believe could be improved upon is that it lacks 3D animation techniques. One of the methods that could be used to implement this improvement could be to create three-dimensional backgrounds or locations in Cinema 4D and animate them. My final animation relates to the final major project's theme of semiotics, as throughout my animation, symbols are used to convey certain objectives to the audience. An example of this in my animation is that characters that are untrustworthy have their faces hidden. Another example of this includes the glitch effect being used on certain texts and images to convey to the audience that something is wrong.